Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to Grand Rounds. I'm your host, Chelsea Song, and today I'll also be your presenter. Today we're going to be chatting about the basis of Six Sigma, why Six Sigma is an important tool for improving healthcare. And if you joined us last week, we're going to also be delving into the travel screening that Dr. Frith presented on. So give me just a second and let me share the correct screen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep, looks good, Chelsea.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so some takeaways I would like for the group to learn today is to build a foundation for Lean and Six Sigma concepts and to understand the difference between Lean and Six Sigma. To be able to describe the components of DMAIC, and I'd like for everyone to have a takeaway from the presentation with a new or renewed interest in process improvement. To talk about Six Sigma concepts, we must first define what is Six Sigma. Six Sigma gets its name from statistics, but more specifically from a field called statistical quality control, which evaluates process capability. That's a really fancy way of saying that statistical quality control is really discussing consistency. Consider a fast food restaurant. McDonald's is able to produce the Big Mac's quality despite geographical location because of strong statistical quality control. Six Sigma as a methodology, as you may have guessed from the definition, it focuses on quality and consistency. By consistency, I mean delivering products and services that day to day meet defined quality standards. For healthcare, that looks like providing reliable and uniform care to patients and ensuring healthcare professionals follow established protocols and guidelines consistently across all different settings and over time. Consider managing a patient with a chronic condition such as diabetes. Treatment guidelines, care coordination, education and training, and communicating with the patient should all be delivered without much variation to ensure the condition is managed appropriately. Without consistency, the patient could be harmed. So Six Sigma is focused on reducing variation, whereas Lean focuses on minimizing inefficiencies due to delays, errors, or waste. Consider a situation in which process efficiency is key to delivering customer value, such as an emergency department. EDs are designed to minimize delays so that patients can be seen soon after arrival. If the triage staff does not have a consistent process or has lots of variation, mistakes and defects are created, putting the patient at risk of harm. So let's take a moment to briefly chat about the origin and history of Six Sigma. Between 1809 to 1924, we have Six Sigma used as a metric. Walter Shewhart, an American physicist and statistician, developed the fundamental concept and principles of statistical process control. He recognized that quality issues in manufacturing were not solely due to workers' errors, but were influenced by the variation in production process itself. Shewhart introduced the control chart as a visual tool to help monitor and analyze process variation. Then, in 1986, Bill Smith, also an American engineer, took it a step further and created the foundation for what is Six Sigma today. Working at Motorola at the time, he needed a quality management tool to analyze and increase business performance. Taking cues from Shewhart, Smith developed the standard process to evaluate deviations. Then, in 2000, Jack Welch, the chairman of General Electric, made Six Sigma famous after he adopted at GE and refined Bill Smith's process. He added the D to what we know as DMAIC, and I'll be addressing what DMAIC is as we move through the presentation. GE then linked the performance improvement to executive compensation and ROIs, or return on investments. This proved that Six Sigma had a financial benefit, and Jack Welch famously stated that Six Sigma changed the DNA of GE. And I apologize, guys. I am 6 months pregnant, and that's putting a ton of pressure on my diaphragm and my ability to intake breath. So bear with me on it. Okay, so why is Six Sigma important today? In 2011, ISO, or the International Organization for Standardization, provided several standards related to quality management that can be integrated with Six Sigma principles and practices. Hospitals that use DNV as their accrediting body also know ISO 9001, as the accreditation standards are built on ISO 9001. ISO 13053 1 and 2 is also a standard specifically focused on Lean and Six Sigma. It provides guidance on its use and techniques for process improvement and waste reduction. So needless to say, if you work in healthcare, you can't escape Six Sigma. Okay, so moving right along, some of you who are familiar with Lean and Six Sigma have likely noticed I'm deliberately separating Lean and Six Sigma, and some of the audience may have heard the phrase Lean Six Sigma without any separation. I want to call out that Lean and Six Sigma are two different processes. Both concepts address separate issues, and while they are complementary to each other, neither is dependent upon the other. So a process can be lean and still have unacceptable levels of variation, and likewise, a process can have little variation but not be efficient. Consider a time that you have eaten at a restaurant where service is always quick, but the food quality is hit or miss. This would be considered a lean operation, but would still require Six Sigma intervention to reduce the variation in quality. Conversely, consider a time at another restaurant where the food is incredible, but the service often takes an hour or more. This process would not be considered lean, but does deliver a consistent product. This is why it's recommended to complete Six Sigma first, because lean is about creating an efficient process, and Six Sigma is about making the process deliver what the customer wants with little variation. You don't want to complete lean first because you could make a completely efficient process, that delivers something the customer doesn't want. Simply put, Six Sigma is optimal when your process has a lot of variation or doesn't deliver what the customer is asking for, while Lean is optimal when your process delivers what the customer asked for, but the process itself needs to be more efficient or productive. So next, I just want to briefly touch on the hierarchy of the belt system in Six Sigma. The belt system refers to a hierarchical structure that categorizes individuals based on their knowledge, skill, and roles within Six Sigma projects. The belt system draws inspiration from martial arts, where different colored belts represent various levels of proficiency. The most commonly recognized belt system is yellow, green, black, and master black belts. Recently, though, a white belt was added to the hierarchy. So what does each belt represent? Each belt corresponds to a specific level of training and expertise in Six Sigma methodologies and tools. Individuals progress through the belts by completing training, demonstrating proficiency, and successfully leading Six Sigma projects that increase in levels of complexity and impact, and then going on to take the national certification. I won't go through all the levels in detail, but feel free to pause the slide on the recording and read through the levels at your leisure. Now that we have an understanding of the origins of Six Sigma, let's go a little bit deeper. There are two fundamental methodologies that make up Six Sigma. We've got DMAIC, or Define, Measure, Analyze, Improve, Control. And we've got DMAIC, or Define, Measure, Analyze, Design, and Verify. For today, I'll only be focusing on DMAIC, which is the most often used in healthcare. Okay. In the next handful of slides, we're going to walk through a scenario for a hospital that uses DMAIC to improve a process. Prior to moving on to this scenario, we need to spend some time discussing what each letter of DMAIC represents. Each letter represents a phase within the process. There are many tools and techniques which can be used within each phase, and we'll discuss that as we move through the scenario. So the phase starts with defining the problem or goal, followed by collecting data, analyzing that data, implementing improvements, and finally establishing a control measure. I think everyone on this presentation has worked with an individual who wants to jump from the define phase straight to the improve phase, which is an easy mistake to make. If a process is truly easy to fix, Six Sigma will tell you to JDI or just do it. JDI skips almost all of the DMAIC process and directly implements a solution. The JDI approach is most suitable for simple, well-understood problems with known solutions and should be used judiciously. Okay, before we can move through the phases in the next scenario, we need to first consider a couple of project planning items. There are two different methods to deliver DMAIC, a rapid or standard cycle. A rapid cycle involves streamlining the DMAIC phases to expedite problem solving and improvement efforts, aiming for quick results within a short time frame. Instead of taking months to complete each DMAIC phase, a rapid cycle compresses timeframes and often targets completion within days or weeks. A standard cycle has no prescribed timeframe for the phases. There are pros and cons to each type of cycle that should be evaluated based upon the needs and goals of the project. Next, you need to consider your project team. For the project to be successful, the project team needs to have several members with differing roles and responsibilities. The executive sponsor, for example, is crucial as they provide visible leadership support for the project. Their endorsement and active involvement demonstrates the importance of the initiative, which can help the project team with resource allocation and ensure accountability. The project team leader is different from the coach, as the project team leader is a subject matter expert, while the coach is an expert in Six Sigma and ensures the process follows each phase as designed. The process owner is active in every part of DMAIC, but also holds an important role in the control phase as they are responsible for ensuring sustained improvement after project handoff. Finally, team members bring invaluable insight and knowledge to the process. So now that you have selected your cycle style and project team, you'll want to complete a pre-project risk assessment and consider a timeline for project completion. The timeline would be extremely basic at this point and should be updated as the project progresses. The pre-project risk assessment is a process of evaluating potential risks and uncertainties associated with undertaking the DMAIC project. It involves identifying and analyzing potential barriers, challenges, and uncertainties that may hinder the successful completion of the project. The risk assessment includes identification of the risk, analysis of the risk mitigation planning and strategy, and then risk monitoring and control. An example of risk could be staff unwillingness to participate or resistance to change in process. Okay, so now we've come to the scenario. Let's review this 100% completely made up scenario that I have outlined. Imagine a healthcare facility wants to operationalize travel screening for patients. The goal is to identify patients who may have traveled to high-risk areas and might require additional screenings or precautions to prevent the spread of infectious diseases. The facility recognizes the need to implement a standardized and efficient travel screening process to ensure the safety of both the patient and the healthcare staff. In this scenario, executive leadership has made the decision to complete a rapid cycle due to the nature of the problem. Executive leadership has already developed a business case, which is a document that outlines the justification and rationale for initiating a particular project within the organization. The business case, or the why do we need to do this project, states that the hospital reported 8 sentinel events as a result from Marburg virus that was not caught during routine checkups after a church mission returned from Equatorial Guinea. The first step for the project team was to define the problem, which noted there is no standard process for patients to receive a travel screen upon returning home. The project team took time to identify goals and objectives, which include a standard process for screening to be implemented across the system. The team started a project charter, which is a formal living document that serves as the foundation and anchor for the project. It outlines key details and objectives of the improvement initiative. So what tools did Six Sigma provide the team to define the problem efficiently? First, the team completed a SIPOC, or a visual process map, which defines suppliers, inputs, process, outputs, and customers. The goal of the SIPOC is to identify all relevant steps from the process beginning to end. The SIPOC process is involved, and I do just want to expose the group to the term, and we'll have to save a more extensive discussion for another day. The team then defined outputs, which are the products, services, or results generated by the processes delivered to the customer. In this case, the customers are the patients, and the output is the travel screen. The team took steps to understand the voice of the customer, the voice of the customer represents the needs, requirements, and expectations of the customer and involves gathering feedback through various methods. They can focus on the voice of the business, which is the hospital. The hospital expressed their goals, objectives, and priorities, which is to stop the spread of Marburg. They both set expectations and requirements and define context and objectives. Finally, the team developed a communication plan or a roadmap for how information will be disseminated, who will be responsible for communicating, and what key messages need to be relayed and to what audience. The communication plan may look different for each recipient. For example, the team decided to create a blog post on the hospital system's internal page to let staff know of the coming changes and decided upon a monthly progress report to executive leadership to be sent via email. This project team is now ready to move on to the measurement phase. In this phase, the team will gather data on existing processes and practices. The team will also identify key performance metrics that provide insight to the hospital operations for travel screening. So what tools did Six Sigma provide the team to measure the problem efficiently? First, the team took steps to create a data collection plan. This plan outlines the process and methods for collecting data and serves as a roadmap for the analysis phase. The data collection plan includes defining why this data is important to the project, the source from which the data will be obtained, the collection method, a defined sample size and technique, and a plan to ensure the data is measured accurately. Next, the team created a current state process map, which outlines all details of the current process from start to finish. Next, the team used the visual tool to organize and categorize data ideas and information called an affinity diagram. This helps identify patterns and relationships and themes within the data to help facilitate a deeper understanding of complex issues and enable effective decision-making. The team collected the data and then grouped it by liked ideas. And finally, this team was ready to finalize the project charter and add a KPIM, or a key performance indicator metric, also known as a KPI, that helps monitor progress and provides insight into whether the desired objectives are being achieved. KPIs are typically selected based on their relevance to the project goals and can depend on the specific context. KPIs should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, or SMART. And they also selected the project KPOM, or Key Process Output Metric. The KPOM represents the critical output or deliverables of the process that directly impacts the customer or the business objective. The KPOM in this case is ensuring the patient receives the travel screen and that the hospital acts should the patient test positive for an identified infectious disease. The team has spent a lot of time collecting data and is now ready to move on to the analyze phase. This phase seeks to understand why the current process isn't meeting the target, or in this case, why the travel screen process is missing patients who could potentially have infectious diseases. This is a particularly important phase as the data you have collected will now be analyzed and used to identify the root cause of the problem instead of just addressing the symptoms. So what tools did Six Sigma provide for the team to analyze the data efficiently? First, they completed a value-added, not value-added analysis of the process workflow. Value-added activities are essential steps or processes that directly contribute to meeting customer requirements. An example of a value-added step for this scenario would be the medical associate calls a patient who received travel vaccines within the last 1 month with the assumption the patient has traveled internationally. Non-value-added activities, also known as waste or non-essential activities, are those that do not contribute to the final product or service or meet the customer's requirements. These activities consume resources, time, and effort without adding any value. Examples of non-value-added activities include excessive paperwork, unnecessary movement or transportation, redundant approvals, overprocessing, wait times, and rework. For this scenario, it was determined the doctor had to sign off prior to the MA calling the patient. This was not necessary and wasted time as the doctor is busy and would often forget. Next, the team defined critical X. Critical X refers to the critical input variables or factors that have significant impact on the output or performance of a process. During the analyze phase, the goal is to identify and understand the root cause of the process variation or defect. Critical X's are key factors that contribute to the most observed variation. By identifying and addressing these critical X's, process improvement can be made to enhance the overall performance. During this process, the team identified one critical X being the accuracy of the travel screening questionnaire. The inaccurate travel screening and the use of multiple types of travel screening questionnaires significantly impacted the overall process. Finally, a root cause analysis was conducted using the 5 whys. This process involves asking why repeatedly, typically 5 times, to delve deeper into the underlying cause of an issue. By doing so, you can uncover the fundamental reason contributing to the problem versus just addressing superficial symptoms. Using the example, the staff isn't educated on travel screenings and its importance, the team asked, why is that? To continue until they got to the root cause. Based on this 5 why analysis, it appears the primary reason staff isn't educated on travel screening and its importance is due to the lack of recognition and awareness within the organization regarding the significance of travel screening and its potential risk associated with inadequate education. To address this issue, it would be important to raise awareness among leadership. The team has analyzed the data and discovered the root cause of the problem. They are now ready to develop an improvement strategy and pilot with a select group. So I do want to take a moment here and note that it is important to pilot prior to replicating across the system. During the pilot, all the kinks and process are smoothed out with little interruption to other units. Some examples for today's presentation may include standardized screening criteria, creating standardized screening forms, educating staff, and implementing communication channels. So what tools did Six Sigma provide the team to improve the process? First, the team developed a solution set or a collection of potential solutions and options that are in response to the problem. Solution sets can be generated through various methods such as brainstorming sessions, researching best practices, consultation with experts, or even considering lessons learned from similar situations. It's important to have a couple of different potential solutions to ensure all operations have been explored thoroughly. Once the solution set is established, the group assessed and evaluated each potential solution based on feasibility, cost, impact, and alignment with the desired outcome. Next, the group created a new process map outlining each step. Process maps need to be as detailed as possible. No step is too small. The process map helped the team create a step-by-step document that provides clear and standard instruction on how to screen the patient, called Standard Work Instructions, or an SWI. Just like the process map, an SWI should be written as detailed as possible. Consider instructions you may have read before where the first step is turn on the computer. This is a great example of how detailed an SWI needs to be. You're working with and planning for your lowest common denominator for education. Next, the team planned for educating staff members. The plan includes who will receive training and on what portion of the process. Medical assistants, for example, do not do the same work as a registered nurse and therefore require different trainings. Finally, the team created a control plan. The control plan is a document that outlines strategies, procedures, and measures to sustain improvements achieved during the improvement phase, and then again, ensure long-term process stability. At this point, the team would be ready to pilot their project. During the pilot phase, the team may need to reassess improvement frequently and cannot move on to the control phase until the pilot produces measurable achievements and change. For this project, the team identified a 95% screening of patients as the goal. The improvement phase is not complete until the goal has been reached and the process has been refined to define the goal. Finally, the team moved into its final phase, the control phase. In this phase, the process owner has established methods for monitoring and auditing the implemented change. A replication plan has been developed and includes standard work instructions to replicate the piloted process across the entire system, ensuring there is no variation in process, and have updated essential policies throughout the hospital system. At this point, the project is complete and handed off to the process owner. The project can be reopened if auditing shows sustainability issues. At the point of auditing, if you discover any type of inefficiency, you would not complete another full DMAIC, but would reopen the improve phase and then implement changes. Okay, I know that this was very quick, so if I need to go back to something, please just let me know. So now that we've walked through the DMAIC phase, I want to transition into some of the barriers you may experience trying to implement change. Some of the top reasons DMAIC fails is due to a lack of leadership support. If your leader doesn't care, why should you? A lack of available resources, and this is a big one as we continue to recover from COVID, and I understand that personnel shortages are still affecting everybody across the care continuum. So it's difficult to implement change if you physically do not have the staff to fill the role. Another barrier I encounter, and this is typically from inexperienced teams, is misscoping. The concept of boiling the ocean isn't new, but I like it because it concisely describes an approach or task that is excessively ambitious, impractical, or unrealistic in scope. Boiling the ocean sets a team up for failure because the topic is too complex to be realistically accomplished with available resources, time, and constraints. And finally, if staff is unwilling or unmotivated to make change, your project will likely fail. A little caveat to this one. Early in my Six Sigma days, I would get discouraged when successfully implementing a change, only to hear a year later that staff have found workarounds for the process. Instead of viewing that as a failure, this is actually supportive evidence for the process to be put through the lean process. As you recall from the beginning of this presentation, lean aims to reduce waste. Today, we focus on Six Sigma and developing a process with no redundancy. The next step will be to further refine the process to reduce any type of inefficiencies. So if the team put this improvement process into place, went back and audited and then found that the staff were doing a lot of workarounds, they would reopen the improve phase, and then they could potentially put the phases through lean to make the process more efficient. So hopefully this presentation has made you consider the value of Six Sigma implementation within your organization, but if not, maybe this slide will convince you. Some of the benefits of using Six Sigma include improvement in quality and therefore customer satisfaction, a reduction in defects, waste, and variation, which often returns a monetary value to the organization. There is often a notable increase in efficiency and productivity subsequent to the reduction in defects, waste, and variation, which can lead to overall job satisfaction. And finally, and probably most important, the Six Sigma process often enhances employee engagement as team members' voices are heard and directly a part of the solution. So before I conclude my presentation, I just want to touch briefly on the topic of project management versus Six Sigma, as I often hear people interchange project manager with a process improvement professional. And while both are related concepts, they have distinct and different focuses and purposes. Project management involves planning, organizing, executing for specific projects to achieve predefined objectives within defined constraints such as time, budget, and resource. It encompasses various activities that have some overlap with process improvement, but largely focuses on defining project goals, creating project plans, allocating resources, monitoring progress, and managing risk. Whereas performance improvement is a broader concept that encompasses a systematic approach and effort to enhance the overall organization's performance. People working in process improvement aim to identify areas for improvement, implement change, and measure progress to achieve high levels of effectiveness and efficiency. Project management is getting the job done, while performance improvement is to drive sustained changes over time. And before I conclude this presentation, I just want to bring it back to some of the objectives that I outlined in the very beginning. So the main takeaways are Six Sigma, the definition is just a reduction in variation. Lean is a reduction in inefficiencies or waste. DMAIC is a Six Sigma concept used on existing processes. And there are specific processes within each phase of the DMAIC to aid the team in their process improvement project. So with that concludes my presentation, and I would love to take some questions from the group if you've got any. All right, well, I welcome everybody back to next week's Grand Rounds, and we'll see you